All right. So let's talk about some LCS. Thorin, let us chat LCS here. LCS looks bad on the whole. And by the way, Thorin, I did call Cloud9 frauds a long time ago. We'll get into that. They completely failed to deliver against FlyQuest, which is a team that they should have been the favorite against. But they look impotent and weak in these situations. Sure, FlyQuest leveled up a little bit, but certainly winnable games on the side of Cloud9. And Team Liquid just straight up appear to be the best Western team. I think they played a very impressive series, just absolutely put 100 Thieves in the dumpster. 100 Thieves obviously quite fraudulent as well, but coming off a inexplicable win against Dignitas. And I think people are really starting to wake up to how good Team Liquid is. Not necessarily from an individual perspective, although I think Impact is like the clear summer split MVP from LCS, but just from a pure cross-mapping, being active on the map, aggressive macro plays, excellent lane swaps. Spawn has done a great job coaching this roster, and like it goes to show that even if you are in a less competitive region, you can actually be world-class at certain things, particularly macro, because you can actually drill that even when your opponents are bad, right? These are things you can study when your opponents are subpar and still do well. Now, we kind of always knew this because G2 existed, obviously, and like it's not like LEC was some mega banger region this year when G2 did very well at MSI. If you have the right players and the right motivation and the right coaching and the right tactics, you can actually be competitive on the global stage. Will you win Worlds? Probably not. You need more regular good practice, but you absolutely can be competitive and maybe a top 4 team in the world if you have these things. And Team Liquid's proving again, which just goes to show that I think a lot of these issues that LCS teams have always had is just not motivated players and probably bad coaching.
Also, if you look at it, here's the funniest thing of all, Monty. The way their team is built is the exact opposite to how people tried to build import Korean teams for the first like 5+ years of League of Legends. So what we used to think is this, Monty. You want it to be like you sign the superstar Korean. So if Piglet's available, you break the bank, get him over there. Is Huni available? Get him over here. They're stars. It's the opposite. What TL did is the actual like carry roles are the traditional fucking NA players. They put the stars in the other roles. So think of the roles they took and put the Korean imports in. They have them at top lane, who's a hybrid top laner who can play weak side. They have the jungler, and then they have the jungler on the exact same page as the former MVP support player. And as a result, that's the reason why this team is so good, because the floor of your performance is insane every single game. So the other two, the mid lane and the ADC, they can have games where one has a bad game or an average game or an okay game. The actual structure of this team is just there every game, mate. That's one of the reasons why I think this team is so good. Like if you did it the other way around and you'd have had like some really skilled mid laner in ADC from that region, and then you were working with the people you'd have to have that, so you'd be with like a contract as your jungler, or your support player would be like fucking Vulcan or something. You can see that wouldn't actually be as good. So I actually think they nailed it from the GM job down, mate. And then the coaching staff looks great. Yeah, everything's good. Also, here's why. You know that angle of like, should Impact be the MVP? Why are you saying that this split, guys? You've told me every single year he's the best, and he's the good, because he never was ever the best on his teams, you moron. This is actually one of the few times in about 6 years where he looks really fucking sick individually. Like, he actually even looks now, you could take the nameplate off, and he just looks like a really strong top laner, doesn't he? Who can play a variety of different picks. So this season, I actually think it is worth the hype, whereas different to before, they were using that longevity of like, he just literally played the longest, bro. He wasn't actually the best back then. But I think you look at the team now, everything looks sick.
Well, especially in the regular season. Like, we knew Impact could turn it on in playoffs, but when we're talking about regular season MVPs, I don't really think he's been in consideration for a lot of them, because he hasn't been clearly head and shoulders the best, like not even the best top laner most of the time, but never really like the best player either.
Oh, no.
Not in regular season. Like, I think you could make probably some cases that certain splits you could have been considered playoffs MVP, but this is, I mean, his motivation seems to have hit a new high, because he absolutely has performed on a lot of these carry champions throughout this split. And now that we're in the playoffs, where he's, again, not that this won't affect his MVP campaign, but he is continuing to look extremely strong. And if you think about it, I mean, Sniper is the guy who everybody's like, oh yeah, Sniper, he's the young rookie with the hot laning phase. Impact fucking shat on him in this series, just straight up outplaying him. I mean, Sniper was a complete non-factor for the entirety of this best of three. And it was impressive to watch. What, Sniper died 21 times in 3 games, and he had 4 kills. Just casual. Oh, 20 times, excuse me. He's 4 at 420. Too bad we don't have that sponsors anymore. But when we talk about Sniper, like, he didn't even show his strengths because a lot of the weaknesses were still on display there, but we didn't get the upsides. I mean, the side lanes in general for 100 Thieves fell apart, but Team Liquid, they look really good. They look great. They look like they can play the map. They have a lot of meta champions. They have, you know, some of those unique counter picks like the Gangplank coming out. But it's really just like whenever you try and do something on the map, Team Liquid is hitting you on the other side of the map instantly. They're countering your play, and they're constantly taking more objectives than you. So,
by the way, the real pickup here that was the genius GMing was the pickup. That was the one that was the sleeper. I know people are going to rave about the Yawn one because I'm expecting really good, APA improved, but it's actually the pickup because what they actually identified there, Monty, is something I think has always existed, which is one of the few things you can actually get a decent sense of in Koreans especially, is the junglers. If you go and observe their pathing, you can actually tend to see who actually has like a decent brain on their head. And if you don't know, even going back, I'm being serious, to like 2018 onwards, this is one of the players that like Emily Rand used to always pick out and say this was actually like a good player when he was on bad teams, and don't worry about him being on a lesser team or Jinair or some bullshit. Like, he actually has like skills and knows what he's doing. So I'm just very impressed someone was able to actually look into the mess of Korean LCK, see that and bring him out, because again, this wasn't a giant, like the difference is if this was like a Tarzan or a fucking, even what Bo had, they were mega hyped. No one really hyped Dumpty, but he's just done his fucking job. I mean, he does a really good job in this team.
When they made the announcement last year, I said like he was the best part of the Breon roster, and he is legitimately a good player. If you guys remember, Breon in 2023 hilariously was the team that, oh wow, they get ahead, and how are they going to lose this game late? How are they going to throw it? But they legit had very strong early games because of against some of the best teams in the league where they were in winnable positions. You could say, well, doesn't know the shot calling to close that game out. Well, luckily there's a player called Core JJ. I mean, there's other veterans, Core JJ and Impact on this roster, who could certainly help with that, right? And Core JJ and Impact are better than the players, they're equivalent players on Breon. Yes, he's better than Morgan, guys. I hate to tell you this. Morgan is just a meme. He's not actually good. And so by putting him on this roster, especially in a weaker region, I think you got to activate a lot of his strengths. People will point to the fact that, oh yeah, he does occasionally like die randomly sometimes. But as a whole, like, are we really going to say he's worse than Pioshik? He also has the fact that he basically is, I mean, he came in conversational in English, which was immensely helpful, I'm sure, for Team Liquid. And he has a very outgoing personality, but you hear his English on this team. He does interviews in English, guys. His English is perfectly fine. And he had that when he was in Korea. The real wonder, Thorin, is why somebody didn't pick up MD sooner to bring him to LEC or LCS. He seems like one of the most obvious targets because we knew when he was in Korea, he spoke English. We knew that. He's not a shy guy about it. So I don't know. I think like it was definitely a good pickup, but I also think that somebody should have definitely been doing this sooner, especially with LEC and their, they love to import kind of like academy or lower tier players like Juhan these days. So where the fuck was in all of this? Very strange. Very strange. But yeah, I think in Liquid's case, it doesn't feel like the meta's getting away from them anymore either. I have to say I'm like less concerned about APA's potential champion pool at Worlds because he's been able to diversify that and like show, I think, really solid individual play overall. And weirdly, I would say, Thorin, that mid lane has actually been one of the stronger positions in LCS this year. So it feels, it feels like if APA can hold his own in this situation against like JoJo and Quid and now Quad, who I think has grown a lot on the side of FlyQuest, that maybe he can actually, and I mean, he showed it as well versus Faker at the Esports World Cup. And I guess repeatedly against Humanoid as well over the last couple of events, that this is a roster that maybe can do something. I think that we have to cap our expectations on Team Liquid because the problem is like, who do we think Team Liquid is better than, Thorin? Because if the answer I don't think is like LNG, and I don't really think it's whoever the 4th seed from Korea is. Like, do we think they're better than T1? Maybe. They almost beat them.
The problem I have is even though you're saying it like that about APA, I'm just looking and I'm thinking, bro, how does one just get away for a whole split without playing the ADCs? What are we doing? Like, bro, like I watch LPL games all day long where like a fucking Corki, Zeri, Lucian, these destroy the fucking game, mate. He's played a lot of Corki.
He's played a lot of Corki. He's played some Tristana.
Yeah, there's one. And what's he playing it against?
Tristana games.
What matchup he's playing it into, exactly. So I just want to see what he does when he plays those players. So let me see it. Bring it on. Roll on. Because that was what sucked about last Worlds. It was only G2 they played in the Weibo. Like, I wanted to see them play against the real players. Like, there's another thing. Tell me how much Chovy and Knight suck after APA plays them in a best of 3. Let me see that best of 3. Pull up that best of 3 and let me see how much Chovy and Knight suck at League of Legends. I'd like to see it happen. So I just want to see these players play for real. Same with Yorn. He's going to have a lot of pressure on his back at this Worlds, mate. He's going to have a lot of pressure.
But I think when you think about Team Liquid, their macro is good and their players have improved. And I think their players will continue to improve just based on the trajectories that they're on right now. But the real problem just comes into how do we expect this team to actually perform against 3rd and 4th seeds from Korea and China? And I just don't think they win those.
There's no one we can beat. That's the problem.
Like, and people will say, wow, well, they almost beat T1 at Esports World Cup. Again, that tournament isn't very important. And also they didn't beat them. So, right. they didn't actually take the win there. I just believe it's like, they're probably somewhere around like 8th or 9th best team in the world, but probably not better than that. And I don't think they will be better than that. I think they'd be probably pretty lucky to make it through Swiss stage. With the right best of ones and the right path. The problem they have is this. Here's the irony. I mean, look, NRG didn't play a load of foreign teams. They just played G2. But the reason why NRG themselves at least had like a potentially higher chance for an upset is because you did have the contract factor. Maybe contracts just went mentally one game on Lee Sin randomly and one you will be your one. The problem you have is this. It's a bit like BDS in Europe. It's sort of the worst style of play to be not the best at, Monty, because essentially you just lose to everyone who's better at than you. Like how we're good at macro and we have like tight team fighting. Well, congrats, get in line. There's about fucking 8-9 teams that can do that with better players than you. Like, you do know that's like probably the #1 thing that the other teams are good at. So I just don't know who you're supposed to beat. That's the problem. Like, look, you can beat some European teams. You can do that. That's cool. But even if we're taking D+, bro, that people hating on D+ that much, D+ would win a best of 5 against TL. That's not even some like hateful statement. Like, mate, they can load up aiming with a bunch of fucking picks. Showmaker can get some fucking mid lane pick that can destroy a lane. Like, they could win some fucking games. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's the issue is like when you actually shadow box the matchup and you think about what is the reasonable expectation. I think the only way Team Liquid could make semis at Worlds is if there's a really wacky Swiss stage and then they get placed against G2 in quarters. Like, that's a scenario where it might be possible, but it feels incredibly unlikely. Certainly,
like maybe they're one of the teams that if KT goes, they can catch them, but that's if KT even makes it there, though, mate. We don't know about that yet.
Yeah, and at that point in time, we'd have to consider that KT's going to have to run the gauntlet, man, and they have to run the gauntlet from the bottom of the gauntlet in regional. So if KT can legitimately beat like 3 teams in a row of best of 5s and deserve to go, they probably can beat Team Liquid, would be my argument. Right? If they've leveled up that much where they can take out the bottom of the field in the LCK in order to make it or whatever, then I guess they only have to win 2 games if the other gauntlet. There's 2 different. I'm not going to explain it here, guys. There's 2 different gauntlet situations that could occur, depending on whether or not Genji wins in LCK. But if they're either the bottom of the gauntlet or they're in the lower bracket of the other gauntlet. So it's going to be hard for them to win, and they would have to come back. Like, who are they going to take out? They have to take out like T1 and D+ at some point in time. Do we think that's going to be the result? If the finals is Genji and Hanwha, then they have to go through that. And if Hanwha loses, or Genji, Genji's probably not going to lose, but if Hanwha somehow loses, then they have to take out Hanwha. So it's a tall order. it's a tall order, and they haven't been consistent enough despite the Gen G wins and the highs that people remember. They were, at the end of the day, a 9-9 team in best of threes. So I don't think KT's going to go. Sure, that would be a team that they might be able to beat, but the conditions for KT to get to Worlds imply that KT improves significantly. And if KT improves significantly, are we still saying that? Whereas it feels like just a walk in the park for Team Liquid to win the LCS at this point in time, particularly because Cloud9 and FlyQuest don't look anywhere near as good as Team Liquid. And Cloud9 has been a massively disappointing team compared to the strength of their roster and the on-paper results that we expected from this team at the start of the year.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.